Welcome to Green Time. I'm Don Fitz. This episode we're going to talk about environmental and emotional cost of psychotropic drugs. Before we get into our discussion, let's take a look at the DVD Marketing of Madness.
Psychiatrists assert that they have made much progress in the field of mental health over the past century and a half. To prove this, they claim a history of great advancements in the area of psychotropic drugs. But is this parade of brain chemicals the scientific breakthroughs they are leading us to believe? Modern institutional psychiatry has depended on psychotropic drugging since its earliest beginnings in insane asylums during the 19th century. During that period, psychiatrists functioned almost exclusively as attendants, promising to cure the seriously mentally ill. But as they could not, they were not regarded by mainstream medicine as real doctors.
Other physicians considered psychiatrists as almost a doctor. Okay, because they weren't doing medical stuff. So to increase their status, they needed to become much more scientific.
They need to prove that this is a legitimate scientific field. This is a legitimate medical profession. So they start medicalizing everything.
To control behavioral outbursts amongst inmates, psychiatrists employed early psychotropic drugs, such as morphine and opium. But contrary to their claims, these drugs cured nothing and proved to be highly addictive. This led to a whole new generation of dependence, a solution far worse than the original problem. But the attempts to control objectionable behavior continued, and by the turn of the 20th century, phony cures for mental illness, such as heroin, could be found being peddled throughout the United States and Europe. Even psychologist Sigmund Freud played a major role in the creation of the cocaine industry in the Western world, writing many glowing articles promoting its use for spiritual distress and behavioral difficulties.
Freud, as a psychoanalyst, he for a while was promoting cocaine as being a panacea for all kinds of problems.
Freud later wrote,
"The psychic effect of cocainum muriaticum consists of exhilaration and lasting euphoria, produced no compulsive desire to use the stimulant further."
What Freud did not reveal was a significant conflict of interest involving two rival pharmaceutical giants, Merck and Parke-Davis, both paying him to endorse their respective cocaine extracts. Sigmund Freud's early psychotropic drug marketing campaign helped create a major cocaine epidemic throughout Europe at the turn of the century. Clearly, another happy pill would have to be found. It wouldn't take long. Psychiatrists in the first half of the 20th century next turned to amphetamines. As before, the hype subsided into unavoidable proof that the drugs not only were ineffective, but highly toxic and addictive. Each fad followed the same pattern. First, the drug would be hailed as a medical breakthrough for mental problems. Then, increasing reports of serious side effects would trickle in. Finally, after years of denial, when psychiatrists and pharmaceutical companies could no longer deny the dangers of the drug, they would abandon it in favor of their next wonder drug. Though none of their drug therapies had ever proven to cure anything, psychiatrists continued their search for a magic bullet that they supposed would cure all. And in 1954, their dream, they believed, was realized with the introduction of psychiatry's first so-called miracle drug, chlorpromazine, better known as Thorazine. Originally designed and tested as a synthetic dye, then as an anti-parasitic in pigs, Thorazine was accidentally discovered to shut down human motor controls. One of the first papers promoting its psychiatric use stated, "The aim is to produce a state of motor retardation, emotional indifference, and somnolence."
Thorazine was considered the chemical lobotomy. Instead of cutting off the frontal lobes of the brain with an ice pick, you didn't have to do that kind of surgery. You could do it with a drug.
Thorazine proved so lucrative in immobilizing patients exhibiting unwanted behavior that its maker, SmithKline and French, organized a major promotional campaign around the drug, including paying influential psychiatrists as speakers, organizing media campaigns, and even producing national television shows, a prelude to the mass drug marketing we see all around us today.
Thorazine at that time was thought of as a miracle because it was able to reduce the symptoms of psychosis and schizophrenia at that time that they knew about it. It emptied all of the psychiatric housing units.
The campaign was wildly successful. SmithKline and French's income soared by over 500% in the following 2 decades, with Thorazine supplying over a third of the drug company's revenues in 1970. Eventually, an estimated 250 million people worldwide had been on Thorazine and drugs in its class, 23% more than the entire population of the United States. The floodgates had been opened. SKF and the psychiatrists on its payroll had proved that through marketing, there could be big money in psychiatric drugs. But it wasn't long before Thorazine was revealed to have problems of its own.
Thorazine chronically led to really serious problems such as tardive dyskinesia, which is a movement disorder that's very, very bothersome, and supposedly it's irreversible.
The tongue darting, the muscle jerking, the eyes rolling back in the head.
Most people were sometimes permanently damaged by it. So they were going to have to live their life with this neurological problem that was actually created by the pharmaceutical industry with their medication.
Welcome back to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. We just saw a portion of Marketing of Madness. We're going to be talking about the emotional and environmental cost of psychotropic drugs. With me, I have Larry Kiel. Larry, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And Larry is with Advanced Behavioral Psychologists Incorporated. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
And you have a lot of experience dealing with clients who have emotional problems. Who want to talk about them. Now, the DVD, we just saw a portion of it. Did you think that was a realistic portrayal of some of the problems with psychotropic medications, or do you think the case is overstated, understated?
I think it's very accurate.
Mm-hmm. You think that there's a lot of people on psychotropic medications?
Oodles.
And has that been increasing, or has that been about the same, or what's been happening?
To my understanding, it's been increasing pretty drastically, geometrically.
And are there any problems that you see that stick out in your mind with a heavy usage of psychotropic medications?
Well, yes, there are. It's not to say that they don't work in any circumstance, and I want to throw in a little disclaimer that I'm not putting down the whole field of psychiatric medication or the practice of psychiatry, but I do see problems, and amongst those are what it accomplishes, these drugs, and what it does not. The other is the adverse reactions or negative reactions that are seen in the use of them.
And what are some of the negative reactions that might happen, that you've seen or heard about?
Well, some of the negative reactions, particularly for teenagers, is that they can have very bad reactions, including some type of feelings of isolation, for one thing, suicidal thoughts, and then, at the worst, suicidal behavior.
And so you think this might actually be brought on by the drug itself?
The research reveals that it is, and even the drug manufacturers have finally admitted that that's the case.
Yeah, and it always seems amazing to me that when I look at the advertisement for a drug on TV and it says, take this antidepressant, and then they start to talk very, very quickly and go through what the potential effects are, they say, well, some of the effects of this drug could be depression or suicide, and it's an antidepressant. That's
very much so. There are more of the negative effects than there are any benefit.
So for a lot of people, it's actually
even in these ads.
The ads list more of the negative things that can actually be happening with the drugs.
Yes, because they're required to, as I understand it.
Well, I think that they are required to list only a few of them, and so there could actually be a lot more negative effects that we don't hear very much about.
Very much so.
Okay, well, let's take a break, and we're going to look at another portion of marketing of madness, and we'll be back in just a minute.